Hi, welcome to Business Influencers. I'm your host, Chris Salem. Hope everyone is having a great week. We want to thank you, listeners, each and every week joining us here at Business Influencers here with the Touch of Life Foundation, TALRadio. Again, if it wasn't because of you, our show would not be here. We are committed each and every week to bringing in subject matter experts to share their words of wisdom, insights, and personal experiences to help move your level of influence in business to the next level. If you would like to see a future show with content that has not yet been covered here, feel free to reach out to us at chris@christophersalem.com. That's chris@christophersalem.com. Today's show is being brought to you today by Alumni Direct. Alumni Direct is a new social media community platform dedicated to bringing alumni together from all different generational types, an opportunity to either meet new people or rekindle old relationships from your past. Now, this is a membership program, but it takes all the noise out of social media. No more of those noisy notifications. You get it to come in and generate genuine and authentic relationships with the people you choose to communicate with and the types of content that you would like to share in the groups that you create. If you'd like to get more information about Alumni Direct, feel free to check them out at alumnidirect.com. That's alumnidirect.com. Well, we got a great show for you today. I am excited because this is a topic I love, and I speak on myself personally, and I cannot wait to hear this gentleman share his knowledge and insights into this particular area. Why is EI even more important today? And if those that are not familiar with that acronym, it is emotional intelligence. So, and it's more important than ever, and you're going to find out why. And we're going to be here with Dr. Relly Nadler, an MCC, BCC. He's an educated as a clinical psychologist and has become a world-class executive coach, corporate trainer, author, and speaker. He is the president and CEO of True North Leadership and an executive and organization development firm. Dr. Nadler brings his expertise in emotional intelligence leadership to all his keynotes, consulting, coaching, and training, and he believes you can be more emotionally intelligent in 15 seconds with the right questions to ask yourself in the moment. Dr. Nadler has designed and delivered many multi-day executive boot camps for high achievers in Fortune 500 companies and has worked with over 225 companies and organizations. He is the author of 8 best-selling leadership and team performance books, 8 book chapters, and is a sought-after speaker and consultant on leadership, emotional intelligence, team building, executive coaching, and experiential learning. Dr. Nadler also has a popular blog on Psychology Today called Leading with Emotional Intelligence, with over 1/3 reads. And you can find that here, which we'll put that in the link where you can find that information. And it's the #1 leadership development podcast rated by FeedSpot with over 4 million downloads, called Leadership Development News since 2007. In addition, he has trained over 1,500 graduate level professionals to coaches with the College of Executive Coaching, where he has been on the faculty for over 23 years. And you're going to find out more about how you can contact Dr. Nadler here later in the show. And without further ado, we welcome Dr. Relly Nadler to the show.
All right, Chris. Well, thank you. You didn't necessarily have to go through all that bio, but it's probably good for your listeners.
Well, we like to make our guests feel welcome, and we want everybody to know who you are. Yeah. Thank you for being here. So, emotional intelligence, ever since, we've gotten out of COVID, things were chaotic during that time, and things have been kind of like that, just, even more so as people return to what they call the new normal. And, with companies now, with people working in multiple roles and people working remotely, it just seems like more than ever, people need more emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence, Dr. Nadler?
Yeah, so let me give you the short definition, and I know you speak about this, so this should be interesting. So there's a lot of different definitions. So the simpler one is being smart about your emotions. That comes from a group called 6 Seconds. The one that I really like is the one that Daniel Goleman, Richard Boyatzis, a Case Western, and this consulting group, Korn Ferry, comes up with, is what do you know about yourself How do you manage yourself? What do you know about others? How do you manage others? So your typical kind of 4 box. And I remember, Chris, when I first saw that, I was like, that makes sense, called kind of face validity. But the other piece that's great about it, there's so much research about what a top performer, someone in the top 10% does. And your top performers, as you know, have a series of all these competencies in emotional intelligence. So, one, research says you need it to be a good leader, a top 10%. Two, we can measure it. And then three, the area that I like to focus on, well, what do you do? Oh, I should have more confidence, or I should have influence. Well, there's a lot of data about what are the people with the most influence, what are they doing? And here's the key. Not only what are they doing every once in a while, are they doing it regularly, consistently, about 80% of the time?
Yeah. Wow. Great answer. Love that. And it's so true. And when we can really get to know our own emotions and be able to understand them and not resist them, but learn from them, how do you feel that not only helps us personally, Dr. Nadler, but how it can now help us to understand other people, especially now if we're looking in a company setting with if a
Yeah.
manager to subordinates or peer to peer or whatever that may be.
Yep. Well, as you know, it kind of first starts knowing yourself, and kind of what motivates you and what are your triggers, those aspects. But it really helps knowing others. And a lot of this is pretty basic stuff. People want to be understood, they want to be heard, they want to be valued. And if their leader can identify that by asking the right questions, but also really listening. And I'm sure you talk about that empathy. And there's a lot of research that if a leader can have empathy, and I know the leaders I work with, I go, oh, yeah, I should have empathy, but they don't necessarily know what to do. So there's
Yeah.
some basic steps. And so a lot of the tools that I have, I have a book, Leading with Emotional Intelligence, that's all tool based because I think probably like you, that's what people want. Oh, I should be more confident. Oh, I got to develop others. What should I do? And putting these tools together to give them a prescription or a step. So there are things around empathy, there are ways around influence, there are key steps to do these things. Some of the research that goes behind all this was interviewing people who are in the top 10% and finding out what they do, interviewing people who are just, I'm not saying just, but who are average. What's the difference? And what drops out of that are not only competencies, but behaviors to do those competencies regularly, consistently.
Wow. That's great. I love that. And when you think about, if we're talking about in a business setting, Dr. Neller, this is something like, that it takes a little time. This isn't something that you flip a switch and you have high EEI or high EQ. It's something we have to work on and
Right.
be like you said, if we're going to be leading from empathy, we have to be the example of that ourselves and be resourceful to help people step
Yeah.
into it for themselves. What do you feel like when you work with organizations and leaders? What do you feel like is the best approach, and what do you find that works, long term in a more sustainable way?
So are you talking about particularly to kind of bring in emotional intelligence or
Yeah.
kind of more
Yes.
general? So that's a great question. Sometimes the terminology of emotional intelligence in some organizations feels a little soft.
Yeah.
Although it's popularized now, military is using it, but often, Chris, I will talk about decision making. Now, decision making is hard.
Oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah, I'm making decisions all day long. Can you help me with decision making? And then behind decision making is things like, are you seeing things realistic? Are you problem solving? And then what's behind problem solving in reality is impulse control.
Yeah.
Impulse control, as I'm having these emotions, someone dropped a deadline. They didn't do what I thought they were going to do. I'm upset. I'm angry. What's happening with my tone? How is my tone impacting them? These are subtle things. And if the person doesn't know what's going on for them, and if they haven't communicated clearly? Because a lot of it's on the leader. Have they communicated clearly? And we know, here's one of the stats I love, Chris. The more power that a person gets in the organization, the people you and I are work with, the less empathy they have. So
Yeah.
power, and there's data that supports that, mutes empathy. And part of this is this expertise drift. Oh, I'm an expert in this. I'm an expert in this. I'm probably an expert in everything. And so I think you get people as they go up. Why do I need to hear from someone? I'm an expert in all these things.
Yeah. So true. And like you said, when we get into that, do you feel like people have a tendency to react rather than respond? Because I always find there's a
Oh,
difference. And I know back in the day, I was a king reactor. I had to learn the hard way.
yeah. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. That if you had to pick out one thing, and this is what I like about the EI model, is you have input and output, but most of us have stimulus, same response, stimulus, same response. And there needs to be that gap so that you have stimulus, best response. And so in that best, in the EI and leadership is in the gap between here's the stimulus. And often what I like about this, Chris, is it doesn't take a lot of time. You show your emotional intelligence in these relationships, 2 or 3 minutes. It is in your reactions. And if
Yeah.
you're on autopilot, I like to say if you stay on if you're on autopilot, if you stay on autopilot, you stay average.
Yeah.
And so part of this is to be able to think slow. You know, the book Thinking Fast and Slow popularized slow thinking. And why don't we like to slow think, which is be reflecting and given what you're saying, Chris, earlier, everything's more. So we don't have time and we have quick answers. You know, our attention span is about 47 seconds. You know, it used to be 2 or 3 minutes. And so now slow thinking is leadership. Slow thinking is coaching. Unless there's an emergency, you can take 2 or 3 minutes
Yeah.
and actually think about something and come up with a better answer.
It's so true. I had to learn over time that even if I felt angry, like if that anger was that first emotion I was feeling, it was okay. I was angry. I'm not going to negate that, but I could choose not to react from it. Like I could stop myself, which I could never do before because I would just immediately react, send the email, just snap it back, whatever came out of my head. But I learned how to like take a pause, take a breath, maybe remove myself for 10 minutes, maybe sleep on it, like, and then come back and respond. Because more likely I could find a solution with that person or people rather than just escalate the problem further through the reaction.
So it sounds like you did a good job kind of working on yourself.
Oh, it took
leadership.
me, believe me, it wasn't easy, but it took a long time, but I learned it.
Yeah. Well, leadership is really around first self-development and, knowing kind of what's going on. And so one of the things a lot of times in the coaching that I'll do, a lot of it is around developing their team, developing individuals, but a lot of it is their self-development. And so some of it is around assessments. What's your trigger? So, like for you, what is it that made you angry and can you identify that? Once you can identify it, I like this, what we've learned from Alcoholics Anonymous, I use all the time. You have to name it you have to name it to tame it or name it to claim it. And if you can't say incompetency, that's my trigger, or someone being late, that's my trigger, or interrupting, that's my trigger. You're going to be a victim to those triggers.
So true what you said. I can remember, a lot of my issues with anger, because that was the emotion I went back to my childhood because my father wasn't around, and when he was mostly checked out. So because of that, I was always seeking validation. And so when somebody would do something that would trigger that feeling, not knowing it consciously, but I'd react to it, not knowing, but now that I knew, I was able to know what to do. But you're so smart, and that those tools and those assessments like help you to do that. What you said.
So wouldn't it be nice for our people listening? And this is simple stuff. They knew the 2 or 3 things that are their main triggers. They know kind of typically how they react that's not working. And then they also know, here's what I need to do differently. So
Yeah.
sometimes I'll talk about you have to catch it first, which is a big deal, self-awareness,
Oh yeah.
and then you have to redirect it, which is all about management. So
The
catch it,
self-regulation with it.
redirect.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. I know what you're doing is so important with organizations and of all sizes. It's so important. What would you feel like with what your experience doing this for so many years, working with different size organizations, working with executives, CEOs? What do you find that when people commit to EQ, in that leadership development, organization
Yeah,
development, how does it transform their organizations, like in terms of output?
yeah,
Like, love to hear
yeah.
that.
Well, and some of the basic tools that I talk about, and this is for the leaders. And so I usually do, ongoing training, so it could be 5 days of training over amount of time. So they have training with their peers, but then they also have executive coaching individually where we integrate the assessments and try to tailor that for them. So they become better delegators. So the three things that they should be doing every day, and hopefully they're better: delegating,
So
giving
important.
feedback, and coaching. So I have tools that go into those. And I'd say, a lot of times when I do a training, how many times a day are you delegating? And someone may say 10, someone may say 5. Well, how do you do it? They typically do it the way someone delegated to them. Maybe good, may not be good. And so how do you, if you're going to delegate, what's the prescription? If you're going to give feedback, none of us particularly want to hear feedback. Your boss says, hey, Chris, I got to give you some feedback. And our brain goes,
It's like
uh-oh.
you go immediately into that fight or flight defense mode. Like, okay,
And then you're not hearing anything. So there's 5 steps about giving feedback. And then the whole thing about coaching. So what's an organization, get out of that? And I have in the work that I do, I have some leadership metrics and how they are in being a leader. There's leadership styles that there's numbers related. We'll do a pre-assessment and then a post-assessment. So they have a leadership scorecard, but then also that I always try to involve the team. And so if the leader's getting coaching, we have some sessions with the team. And how do we raise the performance of the whole team?
yeah,
And so there's a team metric. So most organizations, like, they say, well, this is good stuff, but how are we going to measure it? And so we basically have pre and post, leadership scorecard, team scorecard, and then we have all their other metrics. Are people staying? Are they having retention? What about engagement? And typically the data is saying if a leader is good in emotional intelligence, it's probably about a 14% improvement in what they're doing. But if they have X amount of direct reports, that same improvement for all of them.
yeah. And do you find that, like, when people commit to this process, not only personally but as a team, as an organization, it also raises one's or people's level of confidence? Everyone's going to be at different levels. And I
Yeah.
find that with that confidence, it kind of reflects outward now to the customers, clients,
Yeah.
patients, whatever business you're in a positive way, like in terms of the experience now that those clients or
Right.
customers have.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the main things is emotions are contagious. And you know this, and I use that all the time. Who's the most contagious person? It's the leader. And so I talk about the leader is the emotional thermostat. If they're calm, cool, collected, regardless of everything going on, they promote that. If they're tense, stressed out, everybody can feel that. And so the other thing from performance, when you're stressed, it's like having blinders on your creativity. You're just more narrow and tunnel vision. If you're relaxed and positive from positive psychology, you're more open to solutions.
Yeah. No, so true. So true. I love what you shared there, and so important. We hope, listeners, you're taking notes. We encourage you to go back and listen to this show over again because there's a lot of golden nuggets Dr. Nadler has shared. Any other things that you feel like are important in terms of communication? Do you feel like emotional intelligence has a huge impact, not only on the communication to others, but first to ourselves, then how
Yeah.
we communicate to others?
Yeah. So I'll give you a quick little acronym, and I know something to leave your folks with. Sometimes when we talk about this, there's what do you do with these emotions and for yourself? The acronym of NAME, NAME. So first you got to notice and normalize what's going on for you, and so that takes work, and especially men, we're not as good with this. So what is happening for me? Then the A is accept it. And regardless whether you like it or not, you got to accept it. The M, and kind of like you did with anger, how do you manage it? So that's where a lot of tools come in. You got to manage your thoughts, but you also got to manage your actions. You talked about walking away. That's one strategy. And then the E is express. And who you going to express it to, how you going to express it to. So if you kind of have the life of an emotion and it's just data, what do I need to do with it? How do I get this whole process? I need to name it, accept it, manage it, express it well, and especially to someone who's going to hear it. You don't want to express it who's someone who can't hear it.
Yeah, that's so true. So true. And I could tell you, I mean, I'd love to get your, as you expand on that. I know when I was able to really work on my EQ, I went from being a passive communicator. I was aggressive in my behavior, but passive in my communication. So I turned myself from a yes person to setting boundaries and being more assertive in my communication, not passive, because there's a lot of passive and aggressive communicators out there.
And then, like you probably have learned and do, there's a way to be assertive, and so, like you're saying, how do you do it so people, you're still firm, but people hear you and you're still kind of in your integrity?
Yeah, so true. Yeah, it's, and I've learned that, you have to be, no matter if you're the sender or the receiver of the communication, you're responsible, because I can never control another person or a situation. So if I'm waiting for them to be specific, clear, and concise, well, that may not happen. So I know I can control it, so I can ask more questions to get more clarity if I don't have the full picture of what we're looking at.
That's beautiful, Chris. Sometimes I'll say, can you be 100% responsible for the communication? Yes. And then how are you going to do it? But you just said it. Can you be 100% responsible for the reception of it? And did they actually get it? Many of us think, because I said it, therefore they got it.
Yeah, exactly.
Completely wrong.
And then we realize, why do we have divorces and partnerships dissolve and expectations fall through the cracks? And oh God.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, no, there's some great information. What are the things that you feel like you haven't covered yet that you feel for the audience why EI would be more important than ever? And it can be of course business. It can be personal as well.
So let me, I do have in my book, Leading with Emotional Intelligence, and when I work with organizations, there's an assessment around where you are on EI. You're probably familiar with the emotional quotient inventory. There's others.
Yep.
But the other piece is, in my book, I have the derailer detectors. So how do you get off the track? And there's a list of derailers like smartest person in the room syndrome, lack of impulse control. And so I think just from languaging, when I'm doing coaching, people can identify that themselves, but they also may say, oh, that's what's going on with the person. That's why I'm having problems with so-and-so. They're trying to be smartest person in the room. They are lack of impulse control. They're approval dependent. They're constantly asking me for stuff versus doing it on their own. So you have to know your strengths. What are they? Do them more. And you have to know kind of what your derailers are, sometimes fatal flaws. Do them less.
Yeah. Wow, powerful stuff. And I know, when we get to the point when we're getting close, where I want to let people know where to find you and, where they can tap into some of these tools and assessments that you do to help individuals and lead and businesses. We'll definitely have that time. And just as we get towards the end of the show here, in terms of if people were to adopt EQ or EI on a daily basis and commit to that process,
yeah.
I mean, based upon the people you've worked with, how does it overall just change their lives? Just, looking at the bigger picture.
I think what they do is they feel more in charge. And you said the word, probably if we, one of the key words, they're less reactive, more proactive. And then what are they being proactive about? They know their values, they know their strengths, they understand others and can tailor their communication to really connect with someone. What works for person A is not going to work for person B. They're flexible. And I think they just feel more at ease. The other part we haven't said is they're also about, I always ask, how do you recharge yourself?
Mm.
What do you do to be the best? What do we know about athletes? Constantly practice, 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 a little bit of performing. What do we know about our corporate folks? Perform, 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 hardly any practice. So
Yeah.
how am I going to perform? And some of that is taking care of themselves. So the whole, whether it's mindfulness, exercise, how do you be the best performer?
I love it. You can't, like you said, you can't perform on an empty cup. So you got to practice to fill your cup. So you
Yeah.
got something to perform from.
Yeah, exactly. And these conversations, you said it earlier, I start off usually saying everything is more now. And so, there's more anger, there's more sadness, there's more stress than ever before. So what's your tools to deal with more? And EI is really helpful to deal with more so you can be the best.
I love it. Love it. Great, great information you've shared here. I know as we're here at the end of this show, and I know we definitely are going to have you come back on a future show to have round two or expand somewhere around this topic. What would be the best way that the listeners and those listening later can get in contact with you? Anything that you want to share
Yeah.
where you're going to be or anything you'd like to provide them?
Yeah. Probably the best, Relly Nadler. If you just go to Google, you'll find my website. The website is DR for Dr. Relly Nadler, RELLYNADLER. But if people on there will be links to my Psychology Today blogs. There's a ton of information about emotional intelligence there. So you can also look at that. And you'll also get that if you just do kind of a Google search. And then my book, Leading with Emotional Intelligence, has got about 100 strategies. There's some assessments in there. It looks at self-confidence, impulse control, developing others, teamwork and collaboration, communication, and empathy. So those 6 areas, a lot of how-tos.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Nadler, for being here, taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. We are so grateful here at TALRadio and everybody from the Touch of Life Foundation. And listeners, we want to thank you each and every week for joining us here at Business Influencers. Again, we are committed to raising your level of influence and taking your business to the next level by bringing in subject matter experts like Dr. Nadler in each and every week to help you. Again, if there is anything that you have any questions from today's show, feel free to reach out to us. We will make sure that Dr. Nadler has this information, or we highly encourage you to reach out to him directly to the contact information that he provided and that we will provide in the show notes. Till then, everybody, have a great rest of your day and week, and we'll see you next week. Take care.